Hey, hello everyone. It's Brian Akis here with Colonial Purchasing and Making Vinyl. I want to welcome everybody to our MediaTek Business Forum web series. We do this every month and on different topics to support physical media. Today's topic is the resurgence of the audio cassette, and we have a great panel from both sides of the ocean that's going to be supporting us today. Just a couple of things before we get started. If you have any questions, you are all on mute in the audience, so we ask you to ask your questions in the Q&A box down below at the bottom of your screen. We encourage chat, of course, but we would prefer that you would leave the questions in the Q&A box itself. This webinar will be recorded, so if you miss anything, you can go back to the media-tech.org website to watch a replay, or you could share it with your friends, and you could also find it on the Making Vinyl website as well, and that's makingvinyl.com. Our next episode is planned for September 28th. At the same time, and it's going to be on the CD. Did anyone say compact disc CD, dead or alive? So that'll be another interesting topic. And some good news too, in the next few days, we will be opening up the registration for Making Vinyl. So Making Vinyl will be held again virtually November 3rd through the 5th. We hope that you could join us for that particular event. And as I said, registration will be opening next week. So we got a lot of ground to cover today. So I'm going to ask our panelists to turn on their cameras and their microphones. And once they do that, we'll do a self round of introduction. And then from there, we'll go into more of the Q&A. So in this particular case, we'll go ladies first. And Rebecca, I'd like to have you go first and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about who you are and why you're here today.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Tuhus-Dubrow. I'm a writer based in Southern California, and I wrote a short book called Personal Stereo, which is a cultural history of the Walkman, and it came out in 2017. So I think that's why I'm here today.
Wonderful. Thanks for joining us, Rebecca. I'm going to go as they are positioned on my screen. So the next person I'm going to introduce is Antonio Scotti. Antonio, hello.
Hello. Good morning, everybody. My name is Antonio Scotti. I've been working for the last 3 decades with Tapematic. So we've been producing audio and video loader for many years. And I still enjoy getting phone calls from customers that asking questions and looking for parts. So I'm very pleased that the cassette is back again live.
Thanks, Antonio. That's fantastic. And Matthew, you want to go ahead?
I'm Matthew Lyttle. I work at Golden Products in the UK, and I've been 27 years in manufacturing audio cassette and physical disc. We supply cassettes to most companies in UK and the rest of Europe and further afield.
Well, that's great. Thanks a lot, Matt. And Steve, you want to go ahead?
Good morning. Steve Stepp with National Audio Company in Springfield, Missouri in the US. We have been in business 53 years. We were here when the audio cassette came around to begin with, and we're still here with it and have never left the field. We supply both blank and duplicated audio cassettes all over the US and all over the world, actually. And we also manufacture our own recording tape here in our own plant. So we get to see the business from the raw materials end of it all the way to the finished product end. And it's been quite an interesting experience over that 53 years. I'm happy to still be here and happy that the cassettes are still here.
We're happy too, Steve. Thank you very much. And we're glad you're here with us today also. And Alon, I'd like to.
Hi, I'm Alon Avnon. I'm the president of RTM Industry. RTM Industry is a legal entity that purchased the assets and liability of what used to be Milan.
Well, it's a little hard to hear you, Alon.
I said RTM Industry is purchased in April from kind of Chapter 11 process in the French law, the assets and liabilities of what was Moulin Industry. Moulin has a history of many years, many decades in making magnetic tapes. A lot of the business is for the credit card market, but 60% of our business is actually music, high quality audio tape. And like Steve, we know the business from the very bottom. We have 15,000 square meter, about 150,000 or 160,000 square feet of a factory with 3 coating lines. You can see in the background behind me some of the slitting equipment. We purchased the SN liability, and I say we, it's the Bridford Group. Bridford Group is invested in many other areas of physical music. So they have a vinyl pressing plant in the Netherlands. They have a label which is vinyl and cassette only. They have a physical distribution of music, trucks going between shop and deliver. Yeah, I see everybody is smiling a bit, but we love it. We believe in the future of physical music from all aspects. RTM itself, as I said, has decades of history. It started from Piral. We are based in the north of France, on the border between Brittany and Normandy. Lovely place, fantastic seafood. So as I said, we started as Piral, which was the first in the world to create lacquer for the vinyl industry. Going through Roche Poulenc, BSF. Today, we are actually manufacturing with the equipment of BSF, according to the formula of Agfine BSF, some of the, I believe, without offending anybody, some of the best reel-to-reel tapes in the world, from 2 inches for the studios, which has huge demand, all the way down or up or sideways into cassettes. That's as brief as I can be.
That's a great story. Thanks for sharing the history. It's very much appreciated. And then also thank you for joining us today. And the last person I'd like to introduce is my colleague, Larry Jaffe. Larry and I work together to produce the Making Vinyl, and we're also working together to produce this MediaTek web series. So Larry, I'll let you go ahead and do a little bit more introduction. And I know you have some stats and visual aids that you'd like to share as well.
Right. Well, Brian, thanks. It's great working with you again. You and I have been talking about doing a tape event for several years. So I'm really pleased that we're finally doing it. I couldn't resist with the face mask. This is my favorite face mask. I wear it regularly. I have to wash it all the time, but so I want to start going back to my 6th grade experience. So I must have been, I don't know, how old are you when you're 6th grade? Probably about 10 years old, 11 years old. And my family had just moved. And it must have been the day that we moved. And I remember being there in December 1969. We must have like show and tell going on that day or something, because I ended up at a table with these 2 for lunch with these 2 nerdy kids. I mean, I hate to say that, but they were kind of nerdy, right? So one of them had a reel-to-reel tape player about this big. And I was like mesmerized. I said, what is that? What does it do? And so he recorded his voice and then he played it back immediately and he showed me. And I was like, opened up an entire new world for me. And up until that point, I mean, I was interested in radio. So this is not the exact kind, but when I was a kid, I had an AM radio that, introduced me to the Beatles and Motown and top 40 radio. I used to listen to sports, games. So I put 2 and 2 together. I was like, well, I could have my own, record what I want to save, So I remember going to the department store, and they didn't have the reel-to-reel, the mini reel-to-reel, but they had the cassette. And again, this was not the cassette at the time, but it was this size, and it had like beige around it, and it had a fake wood covering over here. And I had to, when I bought that, I had enough money to buy one tape. And at the time, I bought Chuck Berry's London sessions. And I mean, the covering is long lost, but the tape still plays. I played it the other day. So, I mean, soon thereafter, I had graduated to a stereo, not a really, by no means audiophile caliber. And I had, by, I guess, 1974 or so, or 1973, attached a tape deck, so I was able to get real stereo instead of the mono player. All right, so Andre, maybe you could show the slides now. Okay, so as I said, Brian and I had been talking about this for a while, and it's great to do it. Next slide, please. Okay, so 30 plus years ago, cassettes ruled. And what I mean by that is, starting in 1984, it was the leading format. These are the RIAA numbers, by the way. And until 1990, cassettes were the leading format. And let's remember what happened during that period of time. The CD was introduced, I think, in late 1982, made it to the US in 1983, and slowly, rolled out. I mean, obviously, the major labels had a strategy and plan to make it the format and to de-emphasize vinyl, and then at the same time keep cassettes around as like a stopgap format or something, and if anyone really knows the on this panel, or from the audience knows the history of why cassettes still maintain their traction at that point in the mid 80s up until the late 80s, 1990, I'd love to hear that. Because on the vinyl side, the label stopped accepting returns, and I was never really sure what the story was on the tape side, cassette side. Obviously, 8-tracks also existed in the early 70s, I mean, through the 70s, and also in the late 60s, was fairly popular in the United States. Next slide, please. So, I mean, here's, you see the actual numbers in terms of money. And like I said, 1990, it sort of peaked. And, it gradually diminished, through the early 2000s, to the point where it seems like the RIAA stopped tracking cassettes by 2006. And, I find that really disappointing, because even if you go currently, the cassette is not even a blip on the radar screen, which, if there's anyone from the RIAA on the call, maybe you need to take a little more, look at what's going on in the marketplace on that. Next slide, please. Okay, so speaking of which, I was at Rough Trade Records. They recently moved to Manhattan at the Rockefeller Center, where NBC is located. And they have a wall of cassettes. I wouldn't be surprised if our panelist, Steve Stepp, or National Audio Company, produced a lot of those tapes. Also, I had picked up a tape, Margot Price, which contained her first album, which I had already owned on vinyl. But on the flip side, it was a live album, which was not really available on any other format. Which for $7.99, I thought it was an amazing value. And it sounded great, by the way. I had also bought one of my favorite bands, Slater Kinney, a live album that I didn't have. And it's interesting on the packaging side, and Brian and I know this because we have a cassette, we have a tape category in our packaging awards. So some of the packaging ideas, such as the Slater Kinney, was just using the old, mixtape concept. Next slide, please. So 2 years ago at Rough Trade, they were in Brooklyn, and cassettes were very prominent displayed there. And in fact, they had this one display that was on both sides, and they had an idea cassette of, they had this, promotion, cassette of the month. I'm not sure if they're still planning on doing that in the new store. Obviously, Rough Trade began in the UK. I think we do have Matthew. You're from the UK, right? Yeah. I don't know if what Rough Trade's like in terms of cassettes over there, but I would assume pretty similar. But my point is, when I was here at the Brooklyn store is where I bought Rebecca's book, Personal Stereo. And, it brought back all kinds of memories for myself. I was in the late 80s, I wrote about cable television, and one of the cable networks gave as a premium a Walkman. It was my first Walkman. And it was such an amazing experience. Like I was in my own movie soundtrack as I was walking down the street. I never experienced anything like that before. So I guess that's enough on the slides. So Rebecca, here's my question for you. What made you want to write about the Walkman, and how was that intriguing for you? And then also, please put it into some sort of perspective. You wrote the book. The book was published, I think, in 2017, right? Were you researching this years prior? And are you amazed at where cassettes are today that we would have a webinar like this?
So I was drawn to the topic, I think, just out of fond memories from my Walkman and that experience you described, of feeling like you're in your own world on your own movie set. So initially it was mainly that. I also, the more I thought about it, realized that it was more interesting than I had realized as I started to think about how the Walkman was kind of a precursor to our personal devices today, and both the continuity there and the contrasts. So that was, for me, fascinating to think about, in part because I adored my Walkman, but I'm often quite bothered by personal devices and the ways that people use them today. So it was interesting to think about, is that just because I was a kid then and I'm nostalgic for that, or are there objective differences that explain my different reactions? And I think, of course, it's a combination of both. So that was kind of what intrigued me about the topic. It came out in 2017. I had been researching it and writing it for the previous year or two. I don't remember exactly. It is a short book. And to be honest, I haven't followed the trends that much. You all are experts who know much more about it than I do, but I guess, of course, I knew that vinyl had been having a huge comeback, and I'm not that surprised that cassettes would have something of a comeback too. I do think there are advantages to physical media, to I mean, if you're comparing vinyl and cassettes, I think there's sort of a romance to vinyl that cassettes don't necessarily have. But then again, you can't listen to a record while you're walking around, right? And I do have a Walkman here. So this, you can, and I think there are advantages to listening to a Walkman over listening to music on a smartphone. And I could go into those if you want, or maybe later, but
Well, yeah, I guess maybe we'll save that for later.
yeah.
Okay, so Steve, you've been producing tapes for, you know, quite a long time.
Very long time.
And are you, I mean, was your strategy, and this is similar to what Rebecca was just saying about the vinyl industry coming back, what those pressing plants that remained, and there were probably a good half dozen that still were producing records on a fairly large volume. Was your attitude last man standing for tapes? Basically.
In a way it was. To go back to an earlier question and tie it into this, we talked just briefly a minute ago about why cassettes survived in the age of the CDs, when CDs had taken over the music market, and yet audio cassettes are still here. They were here to re-enter the music market. And I think what happened in our case, we were loading blank cassettes early on in the 70s and 80s, and we hadn't really gotten heavily into duplication at that time. It was the 90s when we got heavily into duplication, which was the sort of the end of the great era of the audio cassette in the music field. And when that happened, we were still well positioned in the industry because we kept doing books on tape and instructional materials on tape and things of that type. So that's one of the reasons the audio cassette never went away. Even when vinyl owned, or when CDs owned the music industry, the audio cassette was still very strong in spoken word. And that's one of the reasons it never went away. And in a way, we were determined to be the last man standing. We knew what we were doing. We thought we had the expertise. We had the market recognition. And so it wasn't that difficult for us to hold on. Interestingly enough, somebody mentioned a while ago about RIAA, and about 2006, they pretty much stopped tracking the audio cassette as a format. And that's when the revival of the audio cassette began. And we look at RIAA figures today and how many cassettes they say are being produced in the music industry. And I can tell you, National Audio alone produces more audio cassettes than RIAA says are being produced.
I agree. I have that constant battle with them with vinyl. So
Right.
It's
It's very much the same story. And so if you 100% were in the music field when the CD came out, you were very badly hurt, and that might have caused you to go out of the business. But we were well positioned in the spoken word, and that's what kept us going. And we've enjoyed the revival of the audio cassette, like the vinyl companies have the vinyl.
Wait, just one more question. So
Yes.
were the distributors able to return cassettes that weren't being purchased by, or were the retailers able to return cassettes to the distributors, I guess, or back to the labels?
And when are you talking about now?
I would say 90s.
Well, we were producing for publishing
80s,
companies.
80s, 90s.
Right. We were producing for publishing companies of spoken word at the time. I don't remember many returns coming back, but I think they were fully supported at the time. That was Hachette and companies like that who were doing books on tape. I don't recall that they ever failed to take anything back, but I don't recall things coming back either. The failure rate of audio cassettes very low.
On the music side, that was true too during the 80s?
Yes, although as I say, until about 2006, we were not heavily involved in the music side. About the time that this revival began, until that time, we hadn't been heavily involved in the music end of the business.
Right. Okay. All right. So, Antonio, why don't you, tell us a little bit from the equipment side you know, what the demand has been like, and when did you see this uptick exactly? You know, like if you could place a year that started happening.
Well, actually, Tapematic is, it's been involved in audio cassette and many other machines for a long time. And then for about 10 years, the market will shift completely into CDs and other DVDs and other formats. But I still had a customer or friends, because in Italy we have Rossetti, that some of you knows very well, that has been producing cassette for the last 30, 40 years. And they was still producing it, and I was asking, but for which market? And niche market was still there, and it was there in Europe. When Europe and United States stopped basically the production, most of the equipment went to Africa, went to India, and all this area they were keep running the machine because they had a business and they couldn't afford to get the CDs or other equipment. The beauty of the cassette is that everybody at that time, even today, can produce cassette with a very little investment, because the cost of the loader is really affordable. Either 20 years ago, the CD and the optical industry was not affordable for most of the people. Space-wise, I had a customer in the 90s that they used to produce cassette in the garage. And I remember a customer, a very strange guy, if you want, that was producing cassette only for the radio. And at that time, the cassette were only available, blank cassette, C40, 45, 60, 90s, sometimes C30. And for the radio, he was looking for a C3. That was not existing.
Yeah.
So this guy was buying the TDK cassette, super high quality. He was disassembling the cassette, loading on the reel, and then making many of C3. So the business was very, diversified, because with Brian, we used to travel a lot in the States with the big groups making cassette, or BSF in Germany, that was our biggest customer.
Yes.
But, beside that huge market was also a very niche market for very small producer. So it was really market for everybody. And recently I got many people asking for loaders, asking for service, asking for parts. And, I was talking to Luca at Rossetti a couple of weeks ago. Now their business is growing up a lot. They're making a lot of cassette, and they're trying to diversify to make the cassette more attractive. Because, when we started, the cassette was black, and was, with a pad stamping in white. Today, with the digital printing, with different colors, the cassette is getting also a nice appearance. It's not just, the cassette display. And I think the very good thing of the cassette at my time was, yes, the cassette was, buying a cassette was a luxury. But I remember when I was a kid, they got my first player. I was also recording from the radio. So I was actually taking the radio and was recording the song. And that was my personal compilation, And with the CDs and the vinyl, that was not possible.
Well, I was just going to say, Antonio, that in the 70s, the RIAA had a campaign that home taping is killing the industry.
Yeah.
And that was a fallacy, obviously. And, it was unfair to, especially kids who didn't have the money maybe to buy, full albums and things like that. But I mean, I just thought it was a wrong strategy. And they sort of repeated themselves in the blank CD era as well.
Yeah.
With that, we're trying to guilt people. I mean, I remember I used to edit a magazine called Media Line, and this was around 2000. We ran an article that said that the best-selling CD of 1999 was the blank CD. It was not. But I mean, I was like, basically almost foreshadowing the arrival of Napster. But getting back to the tape, around that same time in 2000, I had interviewed Chris Blackwell, the founder of Island Records, and he had introduced sometime, I think it was in the late 70s, I forgot what he called it, but on one side was a pre-recorded album, and on the other side was blank. And he was basically encouraging the purchaser to record whatever they wanted on the other side, which I thought was a really interesting idea. And again, I think this industry needs to start thinking creatively to encourage usage in whatever shape or form, So, Matthew, I wanted to move over to you. So your company duplicates.
We manufacture blanks and pre-recorded cassettes.
Right.
An optical disc, yeah.
So, I mean, at what point was your company, also seeing this resurgence?
Probably about 6 years ago, we started to see demand for cassette. I mean, I've been involved since '96 in cassette when I had to look after 50 Tapematic loaders. It's my first job, and that was quite I was heavily into electronics, and so they wanted someone to fix all the circuit boards, and so that's what I did. And I've stayed with media for that time. I've seen a resurgence 6 years ago. We've had to invest in more machinery. It's been difficult to obtain printers, automatic labelers, which have been bespoke for the cassette industry. And we've had to refurbish them. I even had one with a dead rat inside that was in a barn for 10 years, and I had to repipe or refurbish it, change all the bearings, everything to get it to work. So it's been a big it's been quite difficult to get equipment, automatic inserting machines, wrappers, to service the industry. But it's been a interesting journey to get everything working correctly. We do probably 150k a year of cassette. Last month we did 40k. So there's peaks and troughs in demand. We split probably 40%, well, probably 30% is probably blank, and the rest is pre-recorded.
Well, what you were just saying about the, needing parts reminds me of what the vinyl industry is, the vinyl pressing industry is like, and how antiquated, we're talking 50-year plus old machinery that breaks down. And obviously, one thing that I was curious about, and any of you, we'll hear from Alon in a second, but whether you've used any kind of 3D printing technology to recreate, if you had the specifications of those parts, whether you might be able to get it done that way. Has anyone...
We mainly use donor machines when we can find them, but we haven't used any 3D printed parts for machines.
Okay. Oh. So Alon, you explained how your company is diversified in the media world, especially in the physical world, and also with the label. What attracted you to Milan in particular, being a tape manufacturer? Was it that there weren't that many other companies doing it?
It's actually a good story, because the owner of the group, private equity group owned by one person, is a great music fan, and came 12 years ago and said, "Alon, we need to invest in vinyl." And I thought he's crazy, but we went and saw a few factories, and he did buy a share in what was the Sony vinyl pressing in Holland, record industry. I'm sure you know about them. And we did very similar thing with the film. We didn't manage to close a deal, but we're still very keen to talk to Kodak came to talk to Ilford, and we are all shooting film. We are all listening to vinyl. And one of the friends, redusted his tape deck about a year ago and started to buy cassettes. And then he bought this weird yellow orange cassette from a weird French manufacturer, and the performance was just outstanding. So we all started buying them, and then we said, hey, we need to find who this guy is. This was about July last year, in the middle of the corona. As all of us, we all went to the attic and suddenly found those vinyl that we were looking for years, and the machines. And that's where we start. We're coming from the financial world by trade. So we identified the company, we made contact. We realized that the corona and the very tough competitive environment in the security side of the business drove the company into administration. Called here Chapter 11, as you guys are calling them over there. And that's exactly when we engaged. And what really attracted us was the quality to start with. An outstanding quality. As I said, I still think today that we have one of the best reel-to-reel tapes. Cassette for us is actually a very recent venture. It's only in the last year and a half we went from the professional market, from the audio field, to produce the cassette tapes, the pancake. This was one attraction, the quality, the knowledge. We very well that this thing would grow.
Can you move a little closer to the microphone? So
We had no doubt that cassette will grow as record grew in the last 10 years, and the successful investment in this area. And also we understood that this is one of the last coating factories standing. We are coming from the basic of the basic. We are buying magnetic pigments, we are buying the solvents, we are grinding everything, we are mixing it. So the quality, the uniqueness, and we said we'll talk later about why the market will keep growing, or what attracts people to cassettes or to reel-to-reel. By the way, there is great growth in those kinds, your childhood tape. I don't know if you can see it, but this is our main business today. This is 90% of our business. Small ones, big ones, metal ones, plastic ones. But so, put those three together, a confidence in the growth of the market, the uniqueness of the factory with iconic quality BASF formula and AGFA formula, which we are still using today. Sure, it's going to be a very successful investment, and we are passionate about it. I don't think a lot of people will get into Chapter 11 process unless that. It's not our typical investment. We don't find companies in trouble. It was a unique opportunity, and the company was in trouble mainly due to financial miscalculation, I would say, rather than operational ones, and because of the security business. So we thought worth risking our money.
Are you selling to North America as well, or is it primarily Europe? Yep.
No, we are selling in North America. We actually had half experiment beginning of this year. We think Indie, all of their stores are offering our Walkman and are offering recorder tapes that were recorded obviously on our pancake with our tapes. We're also selling to reel duplicators in America. We are selling in Latin America. We are selling all over the world.
Well, here's something you were just talking about, the quality. I was wondering, this is a question, I guess, for Steve and Matthew. Do you think the tapes are being made better now than they were, say, 10, 15 years ago? And what I mean by that is, in the vinyl industry, it seems like more care is now going into the pressing and the packaging and the whole process than perhaps was in the yesteryear.
I'd like to hear what Matthew has to say first, and then I'll add to that. Okay.
Okay. So I analyze all the pancakes. I check the slaves, make sure they're recording all the frequencies, and I've worked with many suppliers to check their oxides over the years. We started with the Sayhem, which Steve knows very well, and we use that as a benchmark for all the rest. So I take all the values, and then we put all the manufacturers' pancakes through our slaves, and we then check for distortion, make sure the tolerances are fine. And we've seen lots of different suppliers. The quality hasn't been good from lots of suppliers, but we started working with Milan as well, and their quality is very good. We've worked with other companies as well to help them increase their quality. So we've noticed a difference in quality from like the old formulations to the new formulations. But it's been a positive thing.
Okay. Larry, I would like to say that the expectations of the customers are far greater now than they were 20 or 30 years ago. The finished product, the imprinting on the cassette people are demanding higher quality imprinting than they were 20 or 30 years ago. If you look at the old tapes made in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, we would reject a lot of the imprinting that they did. The artwork has become almost a separate item in and of itself, especially the independent bands, more maybe than the major labels. The artwork itself is a part of the romance of the product, and we see all sorts of demands for elaborate artwork now. So I think the end user, the customer, is expecting a better product than was demanded 20 or 30 years ago. And then I would also agree with Matthew. We have looked the world over for audio cassettes, the C0, the empty cassette, and the Noroko box. And there aren't as many manufacturers as there were years ago. Some of them that are out there and still with us are very poor quality. But we have found that and I'll just give them a commercial, I guess, Music Box in Italy is the very finest we've seen as far as a consistent product for the audio cassette, C0 and the box. And we're very happy with that. I think that's as good a product as has ever been produced. And then I would agree with Matthew. We actually make audio tape, as does Alon, and there are some other companies out there making tape. Some of it is very, very poor quality, but I think that the good tape that is out there now is maybe being held to standards that people didn't hold tape to 20 or 30 years ago. They want more output, they want less background noise, and they want just a better product, better bound, so that you don't have shedding and the tape doesn't wear out like it did years ago. So I think a good tape made today is probably as good or better than it's ever been. There is some poor quality out there, but I don't know how long those manufacturers will be with us. But I can tell you the demand is there, and we've done a lot of expansion in the last 4 years here to meet that demand, as I'm sure that our RTM has done as well. And I think to people making a good product, the future is very bright, and I think that the quality of the product, a good tape now is better than a good tape 20 years ago.
I tend to agree with both of you. I think there are tapes that are manufactured today at some places are better quality than what they were. Mm-hmm. I also agree that one of the major problem is the C0s. And I think, Larry, you asked before if we're using 3D. So we started the process to design our own C0 because we feel that there is a mismatch between the quality of the tape we are putting into the C0 and the C0 itself. All the complaints we have are never about the quality of the tape in the cassette, are always about the packaging. If the cassette is not vertically stable, I mean, this is you know, it will be a key to disaster. So I think the market demand is higher, and this is because the people that listen to cassette today are kind of audiophiles, even if they're 12 years old or 15 years old and they found this Walkman. That's
right.
still, you know, the two kids in the class, which with very sensitive ear. So yeah, I agree with you, Steve.
I didn't mention before that, you're speaking of C-Zeros, that I'm the author of the forthcoming book called Resurgence, How Record Store Day Led to the Most Improbable Comeback of the 21st Century. And when I started the writing process and researching reporting process, my intention was to do all my interviews on cassette. And so this was the very first one. It was dated October 27th. I had to stop that because I realized I didn't have enough cassettes I interviewed 35 people for the book. So what I did was I actually switched to Zoom and then played back and worked from there. So it was like a Rube Goldberg solution. And I find myself these days recording over old interviews that I had done for my journalism, you know, whatever I was working on years ago. So, but that was actually one of the questions I had for the panel. What about recyclability of tapes? Is that happening to any extent, you know, that you could recycle to the tape, or is that affecting the quality of it?
Larry, are you asking, are we recycling product?
Yeah. I mean, is there maybe a company that specializes in? So Brian and I actually recently discovered a company that's recycling vinyl records. You know, so I was just curious. Or do you do your own, like, your own recycling in your own plant? I guess.
We don't recycle anything. It all has to be new product. I think our customers will demand that. We've had people ask, can we provide cassettes made with recycled material? And I'm not a plastic injector. I know that you can regrind plastic within a plastic plant, and generally if the end product is supposed to be black, you might be able to put black pigment in and use it. But when you change and reuse plastic, it can change its characteristics and how fast it cools. And you're looking at a product that's very critical as far as dimensions with an audio cassette. And it might be a great difficulty to recycle plastic and get it to cool at a proper rate and come out of there without warpage or change of the internal dimensions of the cassette. As far as recycling tape, you can always re-record an audio cassette that's been made before, but you can't recycle tape and remanufacture tape, as far as we know. I'll defer to Alon on that, but we don't try to recycle tape. No, it's all new.
Andre, why don't we go with the first poll question that we have? Okay, so if everyone would just you know, answer these questions. Well, I guess the first two questions.
There's actually 3 questions there. You have to scroll down, Larry.
Oh, okay.
Maybe about the recyclability of cassettes also. I think that one point, because I've been working in the tape loading industry for a very long time also, as Antonio alluded to, I worked with him for many years at Tapematic, and that was probably my launching point into the industry. And it was kind of funny back in those days when we were doing trade shows. It's very much to how the vinyl record industry was back at what the vinyl record is now, is because we were, you know, always trying to produce equipment and we couldn't supply the market fast enough. And during those times too, we had people that were coming to our booth with suitcases of cash. $100,000, I remember one time somebody was trying to buy the machines off of the exhibition floor. And it was a tough decision at that time because, of course, all of these machines were already earmarked for other customers. But I remember that my colleague Dave Hill, he was the one that had to carry the $100,000 of cash away from the exhibition and be responsible for it. And thank God that he had that job and I didn't have that job. But what I was going to say too is that during those times we saw, we'll say, a lot of different technologies that were trying to be, we'll say, more environmentally friendly. And I think at one point, or I might be getting it confused with the video cassette, that there was a demand, or there was a company that was trying to create demand for a cassette that was made out of paper. I don't know if that was ever something that you guys remember, but I remember that we were doing a lot of testing and we were trying to get all of that to work. Is that correct, Antonio? Do you remember? Oh, can't hear you, Antonio.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a video cassette, it was not the audio cassette. And in that case, it was easier because the video cassette had the hub inside with a flange. So the tape was still guided inside. So the outside case was, even in paper, didn't work very well, but, the idea behind was that. And if I want to say something regarding the quality of the cassettes and the tape.
Yes.
And I think, I have to disagree a little bit, so somebody can say something. Tape quality in the recently, at least, when I see the tape now on the loaders, the quality is being reduced a little bit. Especially, you notice the difference on pre-recorded cassettes. Because, when you pre-record the cassette, you have to go on the slave. And today is not really recommend to go at a very high speed. Of course, there is no need. But in the past, I remember the good days of the cassette. People were trying to go faster and faster and faster. And when Tapematic came up with a static master, then we pushed the slave to the very high speed. The standard was 100 times. Today, with a today tape, going 100 times is a little bit hard. I'm not saying with every tape on the market, but most of them. But again, there is no huge market till now. So there is no need to go at a very high, at the extreme speed.
I think we need to be very careful when we're talking about base tapes and fast tapes, because a lot of the tapes that are being used today, and I will risk here and say that probably over 50%.
Alon, I'm sorry, it's a little bit hard to hear you. Thank you. You have to stay.
I'm saying it's a bit funny that we're talking about old tapes and new tapes, because the tapes which are used today, I would say at least 50 or 60% of them are basically new old stock. So those are tapes either in master roll format or in a pancake format, which are 20 or 30 years old, keep their properties, but they are the same tapes. I mean, the amount of new tapes which is manufactured for today's cassette is not the majority. And that's why I think it's very difficult to talk about tape being manufactured with higher quality or a lower quality, because most of the stock that is being used is actually still today and new old stock.
Antonio,
go
ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
Well, I was going to add to what Antonio was saying. I do understand what he's saying about high speed. Now, I'm not sure if he's talking about high speed in cassette duplication or high speed reel-to-reel duplication.
No, reel-to-reel.
Reel-to-reel, okay.
Yeah.
And Antonio, we recognize the same thing, and we have ended up in the ferric tape field making two separate tapes. One specifically designed for high-speed open reel duplication. That's what we use in our plant for our pre-recorded customers. And another tape which is more suited for real-time recording for the home enthusiast in a cassette deck. There are differences in the way you set that up. The bias difference may be a little different. Coercivity may be a little different. The high-end equalization characteristics may be a little different. And so I think you you do have a lot of tapes on the market maybe that aren't really designed for high-speed open reel duplication, but we're still running 80-to-1 and having no difficulties with frequency response or anything else, nor do we have complaints on audio. I think a tape for that market can still be made, but it is not the tape for the commercial market of the home user. It's a different product to stand up to the high-speed duplication in open reel.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Larry, go ahead.
Well, actually, there was a question from the audience for Antonio. This is very specific. It's from Richard from Mobinico in Taiwan. I guess one of your customers, maybe.
Probably.
Okay. So he wants to know if Tapematic has any plans to supply new parts for their 2002 loaders.
Well, actually, there is no plan to manufacture new parts. No, not even the loaders. We are actually running out of stock because for the last 10 years, we didn't produce, or 15 years, we didn't produce anything. But we are searching, actually, personally, I'm searching around, and there is still a lot of loaders and tape and material around the globe, because some of the big customers, especially in the Africa or Middle East, there are still a lot of loaders in stock somewhere, and this is where we can source the parts, because making parts today, it really doesn't make any sense, because we still have probably the drawings, but we don't have the volumes, and we move out of the business because now we are in completely different business. And the cost for the last 15 years was very costly, because keeping parts for the loader was very costly. So we had to decide at a certain point to move out of the business.
We have a question from Dino for the panelists. Dino says the reproliferation of tapes and cassette culture has been spearheaded by small genres of modern music, such as vaporwave, synthwave, indie, ambient. Do the experts notice or have an opinion about where they see sales of cassettes coming from? Is there similar interest from major labels as opposed to smaller independent labels? I also like just to add to that, one thing we hadn't really talked about is many bands, especially those who are not signed to major labels, are turning to cassette, and I guess Steve knows this well as in Europe, Alon, that the economics just work a lot better on a per piece basis. So what Dino's key word there was cassette culture. So cassettes never really went away from creators. And let's not forget hip hop or rap music started on mixtapes and sold on the streets, basically. Rebecca, if you have any insight in your research about any of that, I'd love to hear. When I hear you, yeah.
I think I would have to defer to the other panelists on that one, because I haven't, in terms of the question, where the market for cassettes is today. Yeah.
Larry, may I offer an opinion, and we'll see if this may not be the majority opinion. What we saw was that the group spearheading the return to the popular use of the audio cassette and music market was the independent labels and bands. They could get their music out there without a lot of money, get it heard, maybe hope to be signed by a major label. There's no doubt the independents are the people we owe this resurgence to. Now, you ask, what's the mix now of the acceptance by the major labels versus the independents? We probably do half of our production for major labels and half for independents as far as actual number of cassettes produced now. So it's becoming very widely accepted by the major labels again, but the independents are still a very strong component. So we have the independents to thank, and I would say the major labels have the independents to thank for this resurgence. But once they saw the product would sell, The first, and I won't go into all the bands and so on, the first two releases by major labels that we had after 2006, they did an experimental duplication run of 15,000 pieces each. And just on the whim, the idea that maybe there's still a market. Both of those orders were pre-sold and entirely sold before they reached their distribution warehouses on pre-sale. And that's what opened the eyes of the major labels again. So that's my opinion. What does everybody else see?
I absolutely agree with you.
Okay.
And dynamic we are seeing, I think that the independent label and independent artist will still be a major force. One dynamic that we cannot ignore over the last 2 years, short capacity of vinyl pressing. So Larry, on one hand, you're absolutely right. You know, a young 20 years old musician that want to send some publisher some of his stuff, not only cannot afford to do it on vinyl, but in the last year and a half or 2 years, there is a backlog of 9 months. We in Holland, if a client come today, he would not get his vinyls in less than 9 months. No young artist will wait 9 months to get a physical product. So it's very nice that the Warner Music and the EMIs of the world and rediscover it, but I think a lot of our business would still come for some years to go from the independent artists.
Carrie Colleton from Record Store Day in the chat had chimed in and said, this whole discussion in the last few minutes sounds familiar, and she's absolutely right. My book actually tells the story of how the independent labels basically resurrected vinyl, you know, their interest in their musicians wanted vinyl back.
That's right.
So I guess as a follow-up question, what is the turnaround time right now if I was to look to have cassettes manufactured? Also, what would be the minimum quantities that would be needed to go to you, Steve, or to you, Matthew? And what do I need to provide you? Because this is always a question that we hear in vinyl. What is the source that you need? Can you transfer from any source, or are there particular specifications that you're looking for so that ultimately that the customer, whoever it may be, the indie or the major label, can walk away satisfied with the whole process?
Matthew, do you want to go first?
Yeah, okay. Okay. So WAV files, ideally, not compressed, 16-bit PCM encoded, signed. So that's the standard format for that we like to accept. No compression. Also, volume levels about 8 dBFS. Ideally for us. We can go, price breaks are the main thing between, it all comes down to cost. If you want, you can have one produced, or you can have, you know, however many you produce. It all comes down to cost, how much you want to pay for it. Obviously, the more you produce, the cheaper it becomes. Steve knows this very well.
That's right.
Obviously, there's the setup, there's printing your liners, that all costs, you know, wrapping, packing, setting the jobs up. It's all depends on how many you want to produce. So one will be very expensive and lots will be very cheap. Steve?
It's pretty much the same thing. Minimum order with us is 50 pieces. That may seem very low, but that's where the indies sometimes have a comfort level, and they want to see that if I buy these cassettes, I'll actually be able to sell them. And most of them, like the major labels, find that once they start advertising, they sell that initial order on pre-sale, and it's already sold before they get there. We'll have a reorder for a title right after we deliver the first group. So minimum pieces for us would be 50. Turn time is about 4 to 5 weeks. We will average 600 to 700 music releases working in-house at a time. Those are all the way from they just arrived today until they're going out the door today. There'll be about 600 to 700 releases working in our plant at a time. What you need here, we'll accept almost any format. We prefer not to work with MP3 files because of the compression, but WAV files or AIFF files, if they're sending it electronically. We work from open reel masters. We have worked from cassette masters, from CDs. We tell people we can even transfer from a record, but you'll hear the sound of the record play. We try to be very, very flexible because we realize not all of our customers have the capability to do a lot of technical work on their end. They may be musicians and they may know their business, but they don't necessarily have the equipment to produce something in a finished format that we can run. So we have our own audio mastering department. We take their files or their media and we actually build the duplication master here, making sure that the left and right channel are in balance, that all the tracks are the same level on the tape, that the same amount of blank space is left between each song and so on. And then we provide templates for them to drop their artwork into, and they have to have an order form, a track list, and an IPR form filled out, and that's what we require.
Hey, maybe we should get the, oh, go ahead, Alon.
I just want to say, in relation to what Matthew and Steve said, that I think that for the independent label, actually I agree with Steve here, for the independent artist, he doesn't look at the price per cassette. He looks at the price per order. And if you can order 50 cassettes, you are keeping yourself, Steve, correct me if I'm wrong, well below the $500 mark. If you go to vinyl, okay, multiply that by 4. And I think that's part of the attractiveness. It's, yes, Matthew, you're right. It's very expensive per cassette, but if you played, you know, in Jazz Cafe on Saturday and you wanted 50 cassettes there, you can afford yourself. If you are the warm-up artist in Jazz Cafe, you have 50 cassettes and 50 fans. If you go home with your cassettes, you can do it with vinyl. It will take you 9 months and it will cost you 4 times what you make from the show at Jazz Cafe.
We have a question from the chat from Eddie Stern asking, are new cassette decks being manufactured? And he uses 2 examples of manufacturers, Tayak and Sony. And I just wanted to add to that, Rebecca, do you think, you know, with your dealings dealing with Sony, writing the book, that there might be a chance that they might jump back into the production of Walkmans, and or is that they're looking more to the digital world in the future?
Again, I can't, I haven't really kept up with the trends in the past few years. And if I recall, I'm sorry, I honestly can't remember if they had announced that they were producing a new Walkman, or maybe it was that they had finally discontinued the Walkman. So that's useless because I can't remember which one it was. But yeah, again, I'm not really sure about that one.
Yeah, a few years ago, they announced that they're jumping back into the vinyl manufacturing industry in a limited way. I mean, the plant is not very big, but I think like the other major labels, and this goes back to the independent versus major strategy of the 21st century, they are very happy to outsource. The major labels are very happy to outsource these types of functions to companies like some of you who are represented here, which is good for you, that the major labels are not that interested in manufacturing for themselves anymore. So let's go look at the results to the polls. I'm just curious what that says. So 49% have bought recently a new audio cassette. That's impressive. What's the preferred choice in terms of music carrier? Vinyl is 81%. I'm not sure if that, oh, I guess in terms of those choices. Okay. And then obviously, you know, we could go all the way. I remember at one point, getting back to Sony, mini disc was like all the rage, I guess, in Japan, but not so much else around the world. And streaming, I mean, I have a Spotify subscription that I cherish. I mean, for music discovery, it's amazing. And what I find on my own is if I first look for a vinyl, if I really like the album of streaming it. If it's not available on vinyl, I will buy a CD, and I would buy a cassette. In fact, I had become obsessed with this band called Habibi that I learned, they're from Los Angeles. I learned that they had put out 2 LPs and even like an earlier album on cassette. And I scoured every online place that might have this. And then I even emailed the manager of the band. And much to my surprise, nobody had the cassettes, including the label that had put it out initially. And I finally found one of their LPs at that Rough Trade in Manhattan that I mentioned earlier in the slides. So I was so pleased. It was the best $25 I ever spent. And then the third question, who thinks that the cassette will make a comeback as big as what's happened in vinyl? And 46% say maybe. It's only a few years into the exponential growth. So I think that's a really, and 60% says absolutely yes. I hope you're right. And 38% said no, it's wallowing in nostalgia. So, and as Rebecca's book actually talks about that, there is a nostalgia element to people who want to keep it alive. There's nothing wrong with that. That's what kickstarted the vinyl comeback. Clearly. So yeah, Matthew.
We've seen an interest in Commodore and Spectrum games coming back, and we've started to duplicate those as well. So that's another new avenue which we're seeing at the moment.
Okay.
And what about storing data? Is that something that IT companies are still using, storing data on cassette or tape?
You'll be surprised, but there is more data stored on tape in the world today than on solid state devices. There was a fantastic article in The Economist about a year ago. Most of the data we need to store doesn't need an instant access. And tapes are significantly less expensive, significantly more robust, and per square foot of a floor in the cloud, they are much cheaper. This is the good news. Unfortunately, the quality of those tapes are not what we're looking for in music. And I guess if you can produce an audio tape, you're not necessarily being able to produce a data storage tape.
Okay. Well, we have a question from the audience, from Lara. What is the percentage of board packaged O-card cassettes versus plastic casing orders? Is there a growing demand for board-based products for more environmentally conscious? This was again something that followed the CD world. You remember, Digipack became very popular after a while. Recycled paper. So what's the panelists think about that? Not sure in terms of the percentages, how it breaks down.
I'll just say that I don't know anything about this, but I think it would be great if there were progress toward more environmentally sustainable methods.
Larry, we do a lot of the O-card type packaging. It came out really as the Cassingle originally, which was the cassette version of the 45 RPM record back in the vinyl days. We do quite a lot of O-card packaging. Probably 10% of orders go out in that packaging versus Norelco boxes. Matthew, what do you find?
Yeah, that's a similar breakdown. It's what we have. Yeah, it's not the, it's just a small percentage of the O-card.
We have a question from a board member of the National Swedish record label organization, SOM. And Tuba was asking whether there are some territories that are bigger than others as far as tape. I know this from actually a student of mine a few years ago was telling me how his father, they were from Colombia, South America, and the indigenous music, I think was Kumba, was his father had a huge collection of tapes that they would play in the car constantly. I think somebody mentioned that India was a complete, was it Antonio, that India had large demand for tape loaders, and a couple other countries I think you mentioned as well.
All Africa, all the African countries.
right,
Morocco and Tunisia are all the area where tape, for a specific reason, because that, remember that in all the Middle East, the audio cassette was made to record the religion music. It was not religion because it was forbidden, but all the religion, the Bible or the Quran was made on cassettes. So, and that was the only format that was used and recognized. So that was the main reason why most of the audio cassette moved in that area. And India was because they didn't have any other format, because the CD was not affordable for them. So the cassette was possible to duplicate the cassette. The blank cassette was a big market. And that's the reason why probably today is still a possible source of material and machinery equipment.
Getting back to the question about whether players are being manufactured now, Carrie from Record Store Day mentions that it's not necessarily from Sony, but there are cassette decks, boom boxes, portable indie players. I bought one actually from Kobe, that low budget. Yeah, they're being distributed to independent record stores. And also, I mean, Urban Outfitters in the US, which played a large role in the comeback of vinyl, sells still cassette players. I'm not sure who the manufacturers are, but I do see things like that there.
I say a question to me, so the answer is yes, we are selling a Walkman. Go to our website for a very affordable price. You get a fantastic Walkman, and those that are being sold in the indie stores are also our Walkmans.
What's that website? I'm just
Recordingthemaster.com.
Okay.
Actually, doing the Walkman was a bit of a fun, and also we thought it would help us sell more cassette tapes when we launched the cassette tape. I'm not sure it's the case, but it's a nice product to keep. We are not making a lot of money of it, and you can see by the price, very, very attractive price. What I see, I'm not sure about tape decks, but I see high-end reel-to-reel in the range of 8,000 to 12,000 euros being manufactured. Those are single units for audiophile. I see other people trying to do Walkmans. I didn't come across, and I'd love to encourage everybody, and I'm sure other people around the table here would love to encourage anybody that wants to. We had few people approaching us and asking whether we want to join forces with them to produce a deck. It's not our business. I mean, we'll be happy to support by promotion, investment. We keep our business to coating, to coating and making sure that the tape is the best in the world, or trying to be.
Yeah, it's too bad well, we don't know yet, but I wonder if the Consumer Electronics Show in January is going to happen in person this year. I wouldn't be surprised if it was, that there would be a large cassette, focus, that compared to years past.
I can just put in a plug for a Walkman and why I think it's such a magical experience compared to listening on a smartphone. So I think in general, we're just awash in a sea of information and content and possibilities. And there's something appealing about the limitations of the physical device and the tangible nature of that, which other people have observed. But also when you're listening to music on a smartphone, there are all these other temptations. There's the possibility of being interrupted by a call or a text or a notification. And it's really a very different experience from listening to a Walkman and just being lost in your own world, separate from all of that. So a lot of people may have forgotten that or may have never experienced that for younger people, but I highly recommend that experience.
I just want to open up to the audience. Does anyone want to ask a live question to us, to our panelists?
We also have a few questions in the question box still also, Larry.
Okay, I'm not getting all of them, I guess not.
Oh, okay.
Can you do it, Brian? Thank you.
Yeah, let me try here. We have one here from Ranjarj, an audio file from India. He's been a customer of both Recording the Masters, SM900, and National Audio Company, the 799 Studio Master. Mm-hmm. He says, all of my purchases have been direct on Recording the Masters and National Audio Cassette. Are there plans for distribution in India? He feels that there's a niche here. Any thoughts on that? I guess I'll ask you first, Steve.
Okay. Yes, we have no distributor in India at this time, but we would certainly welcome inquiries about that. And we are reintroducing the 799 Studio Master cassette actually in September. We've just finished the formulation on the Type 2 tape that will go in that, and that will be reintroduced in September. So we would welcome inquiries, and that's all I've got to say. I would be happy to talk to anybody who is interested.
I without competing too hard with Steve, I have the same answer. We are in a situation that if we both had distributor in India, it would be good for both of us. We have distributor in Australia, in Japan, in Hong Kong, in South Korea, in Taiwan, in Vietnam, and I would also and in China.
Mm-hmm. Maybe the best thing that we could do is we can post your contact information on the media-tech.org website so that they can get in contact with you directly. And of course, just as a reminder, the recording of this presentation will be there too. So if people want to go back, it'll be located there, or you can access it as well from the makingvinyl.com website. Got another question here from Tom Kerr. He says, hi, I have a Tapematic that I've been working on and repairing, and was wondering people's thoughts on the chance of a modern cassette loader being produced today. With the availability of parts for old equipment being crucial to the continued production of cassettes, could this be a potential issue for the future? So let me start with Antonio first. You mentioned that Tapematic has now moved into a different business segment, but at the same time, if the demand was there, maybe it might not be Tapematic, but could you envision that Tapematic could share some of its technology to help a newcomer to the market? This is something very similar to what we saw in the vinyl record industry. We didn't have equipment, And then now we have 3 companies that are making presses. So what do you think about on the Tapematic side?
I think, if it's necessary, something can be done. We still have all the project, all the drawing, everything. So manufacturing parts is always technically possible. We just need to see the demand, because right now, with the number of loaders on the market and we can find on the market, we can still support all the, the service of the machine. I don't see any big issue at the moment. Of course, there is a shortage in parts, but whenever we're going to start having an issue, I think we can start producing, or somebody else can produce the parts. No problem.
I see there's a question here, whether the cassette needs a brand manufacturer like Sony to re-release a Walkman, with a big promotional push, that would even further expand the audience. And I know this from the Record Store Day evolution, that it didn't happen with that. It was more of a grassroots. They did get publicity as it was happening, but the anonymous attendee, raises an interesting question. Do you need a major brand to like a household name to really get it known that cassettes are back in this way?
Larry, I think you're right that it's been grassroots, and that's probably part of the appeal. And maybe, I'm sure it would reach other people who haven't heard about it so far if a brand like Sony were to try to promote it, but it might actually turn other people off. So it's just my speculation.
Rebecca, I was just curious, of everything that you've heard so far, maybe volume 2 for your book?
Maybe I'll interview all of you.
Actually, I would like to comment on something. So yes, hi, I'm Andre. I'm also part of the MediaTek Business Forum team. What Rebecca was saying, that you have the experience with the Walkman, that you're not you don't have all the pop-ups coming up, all the disturbance that you have with using your smartphone, for example. I think that's very interesting. And if I look at the generation that is younger than me, then they don't know that this could be possible, I guess, because they don't know what a Walkman is, maybe from their parents, but maybe not even that. And I think what I see also in my personal surroundings is that the more connected and digital we get, and the more disturbance we have from all ends, we're always online and with multiple devices, the more there is a need for silence, or not silence, but more a need for concentrated things. So listening to a vinyl, turning off the phone, listening to a Walkman and walking around in the nature or something like that without having anyone be able to reach. And so that's, I think, is, we might not be there yet, but I think looking at what people are doing, going out into nature, being more aware of themselves, that trend is actually something that could, so there could be a rush going towards things like tapes. I said at the beginning, when we were doing like the warm-up for this session, that I bought a tape player for my daughter, she's 3 years old, to listen to audiobooks. Because I was thinking, what other medium could I use that she understands and that makes sense? So she can grab the tape, she can look at the print, and she can decide what she wants to listen to. And she sits in the car with a Sony tape player that has four batteries, and she plays her tapes. She can turn around the tapes, she can go to the beginning, she can set up the volume, and she listens to the tapes. And it's the easiest and cheapest way to do it. And I buy them secondhand, and I get all the stories that I was listening to when I was a kid, and they're still good. And to that other question, if we need a major label or a major like Sony to release something like that. Doesn't have to be Sony. It could also be a pop star that you know, finds out that and promotes that kind of audio experience, and it could easily and very fast become a big boom. So that's my comment.
No, actually, you're right about that. The Korean band BTS with the K-pop has shown in the CD that CDs are really back, largely because of the popularity of that artist. So yeah, you're absolutely right, Andre, that it could be they could get into that business. So I guess we're out of time, right, Brian? Is that
Yeah, bad news, Larry. It was a fun discussion, and it goes pretty quick. You know, sometimes you think 90 minutes, oh man, you know, how are we going to make it through? But I think we can go through another 90 minutes without any problem. I want to thank everybody for participating in today's session. Thank you very much to the panelists for taking the time and joining us today. Thank you to the audience. Of course, you know, as I mentioned before, we're going to be running another session at the end of September. You can check it out on the website. We'll put the recordings there, as I mentioned. And if you want to become a sponsor of the MediaTek Business Forum as well, our information will be up there where you can shoot us a note so that we could keep this project ongoing. So from my side, it's been great. And Larry, thank you also for moderating this event. And I'll turn it over to you for any final thoughts.
No, just look at your local retail places that sell cassettes and please buy them, as well as online if that's where you see them. Absolutely, you know, they're back. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Have a good
Bye.
day.
Thank you.
Bye.